What's going on, everybody? Welcome to a Locked On NHL Insider Report. I'm your host, Daniella, alongside host of Locked On Leafs, Dave Morassutti. Dave, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. It was an exciting day all across the NHL as we hit the trade deadline earlier this afternoon.
Yeah, it was quite entertaining, especially in that last hour, just the flurry of moves of GM just trying to get those fax machines working to the NHL. It was quite a flurry of moves going on there.
Yeah, I heard they were on some sort of hold for way longer than they expected to be to get their trades approved. Everyone kind of sitting around waiting to see what was going to happen. But for the Leafs, a lot did happen. Some things didn't happen. We will start with what did. They acquired Mark Giordano and Colin Blackwell from the Seattle Kraken. How did the Leafs get better in that aspect?
Well, I think especially now with the injury issues with Jake Muzzin and Rasmus Sandin, they needed help on that blue line, and I think Mark Giordano was always a guy that they liked. The experience he brings and the familiarity with a guy like TJ Brody, who he can slide in right away with, but maybe they might have to reconsider with some of the moves, with the injuries and things like that. So I think they like the player, they like the experience he brings, and this is a guy that's well respected, inside the locker room as well. So I think that really helps. And Colin Blackwell, he'll provide some. I think he's kind of an underrated part of this deal where he can help different parts of the lineup depending on where he fits. I think he'll start off on the fourth line potentially, depending on what happens with Andre Kasha. Adding depth is never a bad thing, and on Colin Blackwell's case, he's not going to be expected to do much, so maybe not having the high expectations will allow him to kind of exceed what other people think he can do.
So some new additions, and then everyone kind of scratching their head at the fact that the Leafs did not make a move for a goaltender. What was your initial reaction to that, and how do you think they're going to handle the situation moving forward? Jack Campbell obviously injured. Petr Mrazek was waived. What's next for Leafs goaltending?
I think Kyle Dubas is putting all of his chips on Jack Campbell getting back to the goaltender he thinks he can be. This is I think, yeah, the biggest question mark going towards the Leafs in the last 20 games, in that Eric Chalgren wasn't bad when he came up, but it's a lot to ask for a person who does not have a lot of NHL experience to now take a team down the stretch run and kind of get them stabilize things. And Petr Mrazek, I think the organization has lost a bit of faith in him. It's very tough to then have him come back in a very pressured situation. So maybe this is a case where they just want him to take some time and regroup. But yeah, this is the biggest question mark going with a team that has so much going for them up front, the talent, they've addressed the blue line, but all that can get done away by one position. So there's a lot of nervous energy right now going across the Leafs Nation with that one.
I think I muted myself on accident, but we'll keep going. You kind of alluded to my next question here, just in the fact that fans are probably a little bit nervous at what's going to happen with the Leafs as you head into the end of the season and eventually the playoffs. The Leafs need to win a playoff series here. So, do you anticipate that they can do that with what you see on their roster right now?
And I think the biggest question too is whether, this is, I think, going to be on like the guys like Austin Matthews, John
Mhm.
Tavares, and Mitch Marner to really step up in the ways I think they haven't been able to in the last few years, because that's what they get paid to do. And I think, you can have all the questions about the goaltending. The goaltending could be what makes or break the team. But I think as the important thing is, how do your top guys carry the team when things are kind of not at their best? We've seen them do it. There's a reason why this team hasn't, fully lost all confidence in themselves and they've been able to stay within this Atlantic Division race. It's because
Mhm.
guys like Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, and even like Michael Bunting have been able to carry things for so long. So I think they're going to need that in the playoffs. And if they don't get it, especially against, let's say, Tampa Bay, that's everyone's got their eyes set on Tampa Bay. And it's a little bit of a nervous setting when you see what they did at the deadline. But I just think the Leafs have to think about the talent that they have and then hope that Jack Campbell can put it together, because I think when he's at his best, he can give the Leafs level. He's not better than
Mhm.
Andre Vasilevsky, but he's just, as long as he's not too much of a peg down, the Leafs will have a chance if they get everything going their way.
So, Dave, you mentioned the Leafs and obviously the Lightning adding some trade deadline additions, getting better at the trade deadline. But really, the Atlantic Division as a whole, every team made a move of their own. The Panthers acquired Claude Giroux from Philly. Of course, we mentioned the Leafs and Giordano. Lightning addition of Brandon Hagel. And then the Bruins, defenseman Hampus Lindholm. Who's going to have the biggest impact on the Atlantic Division moving forward?
Oh, you know what? I like the Hampus Lindholm move for the Bruins. I
Mm-hmm.
kind of thought the Bruins would really try to address the top six. I felt like they really needed a top six center there, but Hampus Lindholm, I think going from Anaheim to Boston, he might like playing in the East Coast a little bit. It may fit his style a little bit more than the
Mm-hmm.
bigger, tougher Western Conference hockey that he usually plays there. I like that addition for Boston, but I mean the Panthers and all the moves they made, like it was just the abundance of moves and who they got. They really are pushing for this year. And I think you see how much they can score. Now they have added a guy like Claude Giroux who can score at will. He's so talented and can add that depth. So I think really it's almost like you're going for a boxing match when you go up against the Panthers, because it's not, you got to hope you can stay with them for as long as possible, because they can last for a marathon, it seems.
Yeah. So as much as you'll want to say the Leafs, who is coming out of the Atlantic Division?
I still have to go with Tampa. Like
Yeah.
that group, if Andre Vasilevsky plays at the level he's played the last two playoff series, like the last two playoffs, I don't think there's many teams that can beat what Tampa has.
Mm-hmm.
And and they're healthy, their depth, as you just mentioned, like Brandon Hagel will likely be like a third line player for them, and a good third line player. Like that's a tough team to go, up and down the lineup against. So I still think it's going to be Tampa. I always go with the champion too, because until another team can prove that they can beat them, it's always hard to bet against them.
So do you think they have enough to compete with the juggernauts in the West, like Colorado and Calgary, if it were to come down to the final?
Yeah, and we saw actually recently with Tampa going and playing against Calgary, like
Yeah.
that the depth there, and I think even Calgary with a Jacob Markstrom, that's a goaltender that can go toe to toe with an Andre
Mm-hmm.
Vasilevsky. I think the same for Colorado. Colorado has that depth. I'm a little concerned about the injury to Gabriel Landeskog. I think they need Landeskog to be healthy in order to go on a deep run. But Josh Manson, that's a pretty good addition there. And I think maybe Colorado's path is a little bit easier than Calgary's, going through the Central Division. St. Louis, a team like St. Louis might be difficult, but I feel like if Vegas gets to where they are, Calgary might have a tough time if
Mm-hmm.
Vegas is their first round opponent. Like that's a tough matchup to go against. So I think Colorado would be the choice to go to the Cup final for me from the West.
It's going to be an interesting playoff no matter what. The NHL playoffs are going to be something to see this year, and I can almost guarantee that it's going to be fun. I have a question for you from a Red Wing girl to a Leafs guy. Who's your pick for the Calder Trophy this year?
Oh, you know what? And it's funny because a lot of people have been bringing up the Michael Bunting. I'm gonna leave age out of it. I
Okay.
still think Maurice Sider, what he's been able to do, he's still my top pick. Like he
All
is
right.
such a
I love it.
he like watching him play. I remember watching the Lightning against the Red Wings, and he like manhandled Victor Hedman, and I'm just like, that's a rookie. Like that you have. I think what he's been able to do. I think Detroit's got a bright future, and he's like everyone was scratching their heads when they made that pick. It's another one of those Stevie Y gems where it's just like no one expects it to do well, but it ends up being better than it is. And I think he's one of those guys you can
Mhm.
certainly build around as your top blue liner going forward.
Yeah, I love it, and obviously I agree with you. Big Mo Sider fan, and everyone here in Detroit loves him. He continues to impress. I mean, obviously the Red Wings slumping a little bit here at the end of the season. It was him and Lucas Raymond that brought them up, but man, he might be getting better every single game, and I don't think anyone would disagree with me on that one. It's been fun to watch, and I appreciate you answering the question.
I know, and Michael Bunting's been good too. He's
He
been the
has
best
been.
addition for the Leafs from the
He has
offseason.
been.
But I also just think that the position Sider plays
Yes.
and the responsibilities that he has give him the edge in that regard. And I hope voters see that when they do cast their ballots.
I think they will. I think they will. We're excited for what the future holds with Mo and obviously Lucas Raymond too. But Dave, thank you so much for taking the time to join us to talk everything Leafs and the NHL trade deadline as a whole. We look forward to the playoffs, and I hope your Leafs can make a run.
Leafs Nation desperately wants it, and I'm just praying and hoping that it'll at least be better than past year. So I appreciate you having me on.
Big thank you to everyone for tuning in to another edition of the Locked On NHL Insider Report. We'll see you guys next time.